The gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Superior, Arizona. As Eleanor Foster ducked behind a water trough, her heart pounding in her chest like a runaway locomotive. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Another man who'd promised her the world, only to steal her savings and leave her to face his angry creditors. The year was 1878, and Eleanor was beginning to believe that the frontier held nothing but broken promises and shattered dreams for a woman alone. "You can't hide forever, girl," shouted one of the men pursuing her. "Jackson owes us money, and since he skipped town with our cash, you'll have to do." Eleanor clutched her small carpet bag tighter, the meager remains of her life after Thomas Jackson had cleaned out their joint account at the bank. She'd trusted him, believed his sweet words about marriage and a future together, just like she'd believed the others before him. "I don't have your money," she called back, her voice breaking. "He took everything from me too," the men laughed cruelly. "That ain't our problem, sweetheart." Eleanor closed her eyes, calculating her chances of making it to the stagecoach office, slim to none. Her blue dress was caked with dust, her auburn hair falling from its once neat arrangement. 6 months in Superior, and she was back to running for her life. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her press closer to the trough. Another threat. She peeked around the edge and saw a tall man on horseback moving slowly down the street. His black Stetson hat was pulled low, but she could see his eyes scanning the scene with careful attention. He wore a faded blue shirt under a leather vest, trail-worn but clean. Not a local, she was certain. "Gentlemen," the rider called out, his voice deep and steady. "Is there a problem here?" "None of your concern, stranger," replied the burliest of the 3 men. "Just collecting a debt." "From behind the barrel of a gun?" the rider questioned, bringing his horse to a stop. "Seems a mite unfair, 3 against 1 lady." Eleanor realized with a start that the stranger had spotted her hiding place. She tensed, ready to run if necessary. "The lady's beau stole from us," spat another man. "We aim to get our money back one way or another." The rider dismounted with fluid grace, tying his horse to a nearby post. Eleanor could see him clearly now, tall and broad-shouldered with a face weathered by sun and wind, yet not unkind. His eyes were a startling blue against his tanned skin, and a carefully trimmed beard framed a determined jaw. "I don't believe shooting at women is the accepted method of debt collection in Arizona territory," he said, his hand resting casually near his holster. "Why don't you boys come back when you're sober and discuss this with the sheriff?" "We don't need no outsider telling us," began the burly man, but he stopped short when he noticed the silver star partially concealed by the stranger's vest. "U.S. Marshal Reid Nolan," the rider said simply. "Now, I suggest you gentlemen go cool your heels." The 3 men exchanged glances, their courage quickly evaporating in the face of federal authority. With muttered curses, they retreated toward the saloon. Eleanor remained frozen in place, uncertain whether this new development was in her favor. She'd learned the hard way that badges didn't always guarantee honorable men. Marshal Nolan approached her hiding spot slowly, hands visible. "They're gone for now, miss. Are you hurt?" Eleanor stood cautiously, brushing dust from her skirt. "No, thank you," she replied stiffly. "I appreciate your intervention, Marshal, but I can manage my own affairs." His eyebrows rose slightly at her cool response. "I don't doubt it, madam, but 3 armed men seemed a bit much to manage alone." "I've faced worse," Eleanor said, lifting her chin. She glanced toward the stagecoach office. "If you'll excuse me, I need to purchase a ticket." "May I escort you there?" "Those men might return," he offered. Eleanor hesitated. The marshal seemed genuine, but so had Thomas and Edward before him, and James before that, all men who'd earned her trust only to betray it. "I suppose that would be prudent," she conceded reluctantly. "But I don't require further assistance beyond that." They walked in silence for several moments before he spoke again. "I didn't catch your name, miss." "Eleanor Foster," she replied, keeping her eyes straight ahead. "And I'm not running from the law if that's your concern, just from poor judgment in companions." Marshal Nolan nodded. "I gathered as much. Where are you headed? Tucson, or perhaps California, somewhere I'm not known?" Eleanor wasn't sure why she was sharing even this much information with a stranger, but something about his steady presence made the words tumble out. They reached the stage coach office, where a clerk informed her that the next stage wouldn't arrive until morning. "That's impossible," Eleanor protested. "I need to leave today." "Sorry, madam. Spring floods washed out part of the trail. They're rerouting through Pinole." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. One more night in Superior meant risking another encounter with those men, or worse, having Thomas return to create more trouble for her. "Is there a problem with your accommodations in town?" Marshal Nolan asked quietly. I no longer have accommodations," Eleanor admitted. "I was staying at the boarding house, but circumstances have changed." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "Mrs. Holloway's place," Eleanor nodded. "I'm acquainted with Mrs. Holloway. Let me speak with her." "Whatever happened, I'm sure we can sort it out until the stage arrives tomorrow." "Why would you help me?" Eleanor asked bluntly. "You don't know me." The marshal studied her for a moment. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because I've seen that look before someone who's had their trust broken too many times." Eleanor felt uncomfortably transparent under his gaze. "I can't pay you back, if that's what you're expecting. As those men correctly surmised, I've been left with very little." "I'm not looking for payment, Miss Foster." His voice was firm but gentle. "Just trying to help a fellow traveler who's hit a rough patch." Against her better judgment, Eleanor found herself following Marshal Nolan back to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. The elderly widow greeted the marshal warmly, but eyed Eleanor with suspicion. "Mrs. Holloway, I believe there's been some confusion regarding Miss Foster's situation," Marshal Nolan began diplomatically. "I understand her former companion may have left her in a difficult position." The older woman's face softened slightly. "It's not personal, Eleanor. But when Mr. Jackson left owing 2 weeks' rent and you disappeared the same morning, what was I to think?" "I was chasing after him, trying to get back what he stole from me," Eleanor explained, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I never intended to skip out on what we owed you." The marshal reached into his pocket and withdrew several coins. "This should cover the back rent and another night's stay. Miss Foster will be departing on tomorrow's stage." Mrs. Holloway accepted the money with a nod. "Very well. Your room hasn't been let yet, Eleanor. You're welcome to it for tonight." Once they were alone on the porch, Eleanor turned to the marshal. "Thank you, but I can't accept this charity." "I'll find a way to repay you." "It's not charity, Miss Foster. Consider it an advance on your fresh start." He paused, then added, "I'm passing through to investigate some cattle rustling. I'll be staying at the hotel tonight and riding out tomorrow. If you'd allow me, I'd like to make sure you board that stage safely." Eleanor wanted to refuse but knew it was the sensible course. "Very well. Thank you again, Marshal Nolan." As he tipped his hat and turned to leave, Eleanor watched him go with mixed emotions. His kindness was unexpected, but experience had taught her that kindness often came with hidden costs. The next morning, Eleanor rose early, packing her few belongings. She'd spent a restless night, jumping at every sound, half expecting Thomas to appear, or worse, those men seeking repayment. When a knock came at her door, she froze momentarily before asking, "Who is it?" "Marshal Nolan, Miss Foster. The stage will be arriving within the hour." Eleanor opened the door to find him looking surprisingly refreshed despite the early hour. "Good morning, Marshal. I'm nearly ready." They ate a simple breakfast in Mrs. Holloway's dining room before walking to the stage-coach office. The morning sun was just beginning to warm the streets of Superior, casting long shadows between the buildings. Eleanor felt a strange pang at leaving. Despite everything, she'd begun to think of this town as home. "You never mentioned what brought you to Superior in the first place," Marshal Nolan remarked as they walked. Eleanor hesitated, then decided there was little harm in sharing now. "I came west to teach." There was supposed to be a position at the school, but when I arrived, it had already been filled. Mr. Jackson offered me work keeping books at his freight company instead. And then it became more than a business arrangement. "Yes," Eleanor admitted, feeling the familiar flush of embarrassment. "He was charming, attentive, and apparently running a scheme to defraud local investors. When I discovered discrepancies in the accounts, he took what he could and disappeared." Marshal Nolan nodded thoughtfully. "Men like that prey on decent folks. It's not a reflection on you, isn't it?" Eleanor's voice was bitter. "This isn't the first time I've been deceived by a man I trusted. One begins to wonder about one's judgment." They reached the stage-coach office to find it bustling with activity. The stage had arrived early and was being prepared for departure. Eleanor felt simultaneously relieved and apprehensive. Where would she go? What would she do when she got there? Her teaching credentials were genuine, but opportunities were scarce. "Your ticket, Miss Foster." Marshal Nolan handed her a slip of paper. "I took the liberty of purchasing it this morning." "But I haven't repaid you for the room yet," Eleanor protested. "As I said, consider it an advance. Perhaps someday you can help someone else who's in a tight spot." He hesitated, then added, "I've also wired ahead to the marshal in Tucson. He'll meet the stage and help you find suitable accommodations. Joseph Miller is a good man, you can trust him." Eleanor stiffened. "I've been used by every man I trusted," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The marshal's eyes softened. "I'll earn your trust daily," he replied simply. "Not with words, but with actions, starting with seeing you safely to Tucson." Eleanor stared at him in confusion. "You're coming to Tucson? The rustlers I'm tracking appear to be moving cattle south." "My investigation takes me in that direction anyway." He gestured to his horse, already saddled and loaded. "I'll ride alongside the stage, safer for everyone with extra protection on the trail." The stagecoach driver called for passengers to board. Eleanor hesitated, still uncertain about the marshal's motives, but unable to deny the sense of relief his presence provided. "Why do you really care what happens to me?" she asked directly. Marshal Nolan considered her question seriously. "Because 10 years ago, my sister found herself in a similar situation. The man who promised to marry her left her stranded in Denver with nothing but debts and a broken heart. No one helped her." His jaw tightened. "I was riding circuit in Wyoming and didn't learn what happened until it was too late." The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and Eleanor found herself asking, "What happened to her?" "She took her own life," he said quietly. "I swore I'd never stand by when someone needed help again." The stagecoach driver called impatiently for final boarding. Eleanor nodded, finally understanding. "Thank you for your honesty, Marshal Nolan." The journey to Tucson was long and arduous, the stagecoach lurching over rough terrain as it wound its way south. True to his word, Marshal Nolan rode alongside, occasionally scouting ahead or dropping back to check their trail. The other passengers, a middle-aged couple returning from visiting relatives, and a young banker headed to his new position, seemed reassured by the marshal's presence. Eleanor found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, noting the way he sat easily in the saddle, how he scanned the horizon constantly, alert for any signs of danger. Despite her reservations, she couldn't deny that his presence made her feel safer than she had in months. During their stop at a way station for a midday meal, Eleanor overheard the station manager talking with Marshal Nolan about recent robberies along the route. "Been hitting stages regular for the past month," the weathered old man explained. "Always between here and Pinnell. Taking valuables, mail pouches, even the horses once." Marshal Nolan nodded grimly. "Any descriptions of the gang? 3, sometimes 4 men. Leader's supposed to have a scar down his right cheek." Eleanor felt her stomach drop. That description matched Thomas perfectly, a souvenir from a bar fight he'd proudly described to her. Could he have turned to robbery now that his freight scheme had collapsed? When they returned to the coach, Eleanor found herself seated across from Marshal Nolan, who had decided to ride inside for this stretch to rest his horse. "Something's troubling you," he observed quietly while the other passengers dozed in the afternoon heat. Eleanor hesitated, then leaned forward. "The description of the robbery leader, it sounds like Thomas Jackson." The marshal's expression grew serious. "You're certain?" "He has a distinctive scar from his right eye to his jaw, and he knows the freight schedules intimately." Eleanor twisted her hands in her lap. "If it is him and he sees me on this stage—" "He won't harm you," Marshal Nolan stated with calm confidence. "I promise you that." The certainty in his voice should have reassured her, but Eleanor had heard promises before. "You shouldn't make guarantees you might not be able to keep, Marshal Reid," he corrected gently. "If we're discussing outlaw former beaux, we might as well use first names." Despite her anxiety, Eleanor found herself smiling slightly. "Very well, Reid." The afternoon stretched on, the coach climbing steadily through rocky passes. The sun was beginning its descent when the driver called for the horses to stop suddenly, the coach jerking to a halt. Eleanor's heart leaped into her throat as Reid immediately tensed, his hand moving to his weapon. "Everyone stay calm," he murmured, peering out the window cautiously. "Driver, what's the trouble?" "Roads blocked ahead, Marshal," came the reply. "Fallen rocks." Reid's eyes narrowed. "Stay inside," he instructed the passengers, then carefully opened the door and stepped out. Eleanor held her breath, straining to hear what was happening. The banker across from her looked terrified, while the older couple clutched each other's hands tightly. Suddenly, shots rang out and Eleanor couldn't stop herself from moving to the window. Reid had taken cover behind a boulder, his revolver drawn, while 3 mounted men fired from the ridge above. The driver and shotgun guard were returning fire, but they were exposed on the coach box. Without conscious thought, Eleanor reached for the small derringer she kept hidden in her reticule, a precaution she'd taken after her first disastrous experience with a deceptive suitor. The banker gasped as she checked the tiny gun. "Mrs. Thornberry," Eleanor addressed the older woman calmly, "do you know how to use a firearm?" The woman shook her head, eyes wide. "Then please stay down and away from the windows." Eleanor took a deep breath and, ignoring Reid's instructions, carefully opened the door on the side away from the gunfire. She slipped out, staying low and using the stagecoach for cover as she moved toward the front wheel. From there, she could see one of the robbers working his way around behind Reid's position. Without hesitation, Eleanor raised her derringer and fired. The robber yelped in pain, dropping his gun and grabbing his shoulder. The unexpected shot from a new direction caused momentary confusion among the outlaws, giving Reid the opportunity to advance on their position. "Drop your weapons," he commanded, his voice carrying across the rocky terrain. 2 more shots were exchanged before a familiar voice called out, "Hold your fire. We're coming out." Eleanor's blood ran cold as Thomas Jackson emerged from behind a rock formation, hands raised, his unmistakable scarred face visible even at this distance. Two other men followed his lead, disarming reluctantly. Reid moved forward cautiously, keeping his gun trained on the three men. "Face down on the ground, hands behind your backs," he ordered. As Thomas complied, he spotted Eleanor by the stagecoach. His expression twisted with surprise, then fury. "You should have known you'd find another protector quick enough." Eleanor stood her ground, though her hand shook slightly. "I found justice, Thomas. That's all." Reid efficiently bound the three men with rope provided by the driver. "Jackson, is it? Seems you've added armed robbery to your list of crimes." Thomas spat in the dirt. "We didn't hurt nobody, just taking what we deserved after the mining company cheated us." "Tell it to the judge," Reid replied evenly, securing the last knot. He turned to Eleanor, his expression a mixture of admiration and exasperation. "I believe I asked you to stay in the coach." "You did," she acknowledged, "but I saw his companion trying to flank you." The driver approached, removing his hat respectfully. "The lady saved our skins, Marshal." "That was mighty fine shooting from such a small gun." Reid nodded, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's. "It was indeed. Though next time, Miss Foster, perhaps a discussion of strategy beforehand." "Next time?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow, feeling an unexpected warmth at his words. Not anger that she disobeyed, not dismissal of her contribution, but acknowledgement of her capability with only gentle criticism of her methods. With the road cleared and the prisoners secured on their horses, the journey resumed. Eleanor found herself seated beside Reid now, the others having rearranged themselves after the excitement. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked quietly. "My father taught me. He believed women should be able to protect themselves." Eleanor smiled sadly. "Though he probably imagined I'd be defending against wild animals, not former suitors." "Some would say there's little difference," Reid remarked, drawing a surprised laugh from her. They arrived in Tucson 2 days later, the delay caused by delivering the prisoners to a territorial jail along the route. As promised, Marshal Joseph Miller met them, a stocky man with kind eyes who greeted Reid like an old friend. "Got your wire," he told Reid. "Miss Foster, I've arranged temporary lodging with my sister-in-law who runs a respectable boarding house. And there might be an opportunity at our school. The teacher's expecting a child and seeking an assistant." Eleanor's eyes widened with hope. "Really? I would be most interested." As Joseph took charge of helping the other passengers with their arrangements, Reid escorted Eleanor to her new lodgings, carrying her carpet bag despite her protests that she could manage. "I'll be in Tucson for at least a week," he told her as they walked. "Need to file reports on Jackson's gang and coordinate with local authorities about the cattle rustling." Eleanor nodded, surprised by how pleased she felt at this news. "Will you be staying at the hotel?" "The marshal's office has a small room for visiting lawmen," Reid explained. "Not fancy, but it serves the purpose." They reached a neat whitewashed house with a small garden in front. A plump, cheerful woman greeted them at the door, introducing herself as Martha Miller. "Joseph said you're a teacher by training," Martha said warmly as she showed Eleanor to a small but clean room. "That's wonderful news. Our school has grown so much this past year." After settling in, Eleanor found Reid waiting in the parlor to take his leave. "Thank you for everything," she said sincerely. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't intervened in Superior." "You'd have found your way," Reid replied with quiet confidence. "You're more resourceful than you give yourself credit for." Eleanor smiled, feeling a curious reluctance to see him go. "Nevertheless, I'm grateful." Reid hesitated at the door. "Miss Foster, Eleanor, would you permit me to call on you tomorrow evening? Perhaps we could have dinner at the hotel restaurant." Eleanor felt a flicker of her old wariness, but it was fainter now. "I'd like that," she said finally, "but I insist on paying my own way. I still owe you for the ticket and lodging in Superior." He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "We'll discuss terms tomorrow. Good evening, Eleanor." The next day, Eleanor met with the schoolteacher, Mrs. Hammond, a friendly young woman whose condition was becoming visibly apparent. She was delighted with Eleanor's credentials and experience. "It's perfect timing," she exclaimed. "I can work alongside you until the baby comes. Then you can take over the class temporarily. If all goes well, perhaps the school board would consider adding a permanent second teacher next term." By evening, Eleanor had secured the position and moved her few belongings into the small room at the back of the schoolhouse that came with the job. When Reid arrived to escort her to dinner, she shared her news enthusiastically. "That's wonderful," he said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "Tucson is fortunate to have you." The hotel restaurant was modest but clean, serving simple fare that was nonetheless a welcome change from trail food. They talked easily, Reid sharing stories of his time as a marshal, Eleanor describing her journey west from her native Pennsylvania. "What made you decide to come all this way alone?" he asked. Eleanor considered the question. "After my father died, there was little to keep me there. My mother passed when I was young and I have no siblings. Teaching positions were scarce, and those available paid women half what men received for the same work." She sipped her coffee. "The advertisement from Superior promised equal wages and respect. And instead you found Thomas Jackson," Reid observed. "Yes. He was so attentive at first, helping me find lodging, offering me work when the teaching position fell through." Eleanor shook her head ruefully. "By the time I realized he was embezzling from investors, I was already compromised by my association with him." Reid's expression remained thoughtful, not judgmental. "We all make mistakes in who we trust. The important thing is learning from them, not letting them define us." "Is that why you became a marshal?" Eleanor asked. "Because of what happened to your sister?" He nodded slowly. "Partly. I was already in law enforcement, but after Sarah died, I realized I wanted to help people before they reached that point of desperation. Prevent crimes rather than just punish them afterward." As weeks passed, Reid extended his stay in Tucson, finding reasons to remain that gradually became less about official business and more about spending time with Eleanor. They fell into a comfortable routine dinner twice a week, Sunday afternoon walks, occasional picnics when Eleanor wasn't teaching. She found herself looking forward to their time together, appreciating his steady presence and the way he respected her independence while offering support when needed. Unlike other men she'd known, Reid never attempted to dictate her choices or undermine her confidence. One evening, as they walked back from dinner under a star-filled sky, Reid took her hand gently. "I received a telegram today," he said. "I've been assigned to establish a permanent marshal's office here in Tucson." Eleanor's heart quickened. "You're staying?" "Yes." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Eleanor, I know you have every reason to be cautious. Men have broken your trust repeatedly. But I hope you've seen that my words align with my actions." "I have," she admitted softly. "You're unlike anyone I've known before." Reid took both her hands in his. "I care deeply for you. I'm not asking for promises yet, only the chance to continue earning your trust each day." Eleanor studied his face in the moonlight, seeing nothing but sincerity in his eyes. For the first time in years, she felt no warning signals, no subtle discomfort that she'd previously ignored to her detriment. "I'd like that," she whispered. Their courtship progressed slowly, deliberately, with Reid careful to respect Eleanor's boundaries. He attended school programs where her students performed, helped her carry books and supplies, and introduced her to the community as an accomplished educator. taking visible pride in her work. When Mrs. Hammond's baby arrived, Eleanor took over the class full-time, earning praise from parents and the school board alike. Her confidence grew, not just in her teaching but in her judgment of character and in her feelings for Reid. 6 months after their arrival in Tucson, Reid invited Eleanor for a special dinner at the newly opened hotel restaurant. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous, adjusting his string tie repeatedly as they were seated at a table set with fresh flowers. "Is everything all right?" Eleanor asked, concerned by his unusual demeanor. Reid cleared his throat. "Eleanor, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Watching you build your life here, seeing your strength and determination, it's been a privilege." Eleanor felt her heart flutter. "It's been wonderful for me too," she said softly. "You've shown me that trust can be rebuilt, that not all men are like those I knew before." "I promise to earn your trust daily," Reid continued, reaching into his pocket. "And I intend to keep that promise for as long as you'll allow." He withdrew a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant ring with a small pearl. "Eleanor Foster, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as emotions washed over her joy, hope, and yes, still a whisper of fear. But the fear no longer controlled her. "Yes," she answered, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, I will marry you, Reid." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his own hands not entirely steady. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I had it sent from my brother's keeping in St. Louis." "It's beautiful," Eleanor breathed, admiring the way the pearl gleamed in the lamplight. "And meaningful, knowing it has history." They were married on a clear spring day in 1879, with Martha Miller helping Eleanor prepare and Joseph standing as Reid's best man. Eleanor wore a new blue dress that matched her eyes, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a formal veil. Reid looked handsome and slightly overwhelmed in his best black suit as they exchanged vows in Tucson's small church. The school board presented them with a wedding gift approval for Eleanor to continue teaching even after marriage, an unusual arrangement that recognized her value to the community. Reid supported her decision wholeheartedly, proud of her accomplishments and commitment to her students. They made their home in a small house near both the school and the marshal's office, creating a warm and loving environment neither had experienced in years. Reid's work sometimes took him away for days at a time, but he always returned as promised, gradually banishing Eleanor's deep-seated fear of abandonment. As they celebrated their first anniversary, Eleanor had news of her own to share. "I've been to see the doctor," she told Reid as they sat together on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and purple. "We're going to have a child in the autumn." Reid's face transformed with joy as he gathered her into his arms. "Eleanor, that's wonderful." She leaned against his solid warmth, reflecting on the journey that had brought them together. From that desperate day in Superior, when she'd been ready to flee everything, to creating a new life built on mutual respect and genuine love. "Are you happy?" Reid asked softly, his hand gently covering hers where it rested against her still flat stomach. "Completely," Eleanor answered truthfully. "You've shown me what trust really means, not blind faith, but a relationship built day by day through actions and respect." In September, their son was born, a healthy, strong boy they named William after Eleanor's father. The community celebrated with them, bringing gifts and good wishes for the family that had become an integral part of Tucson. As Eleanor watched Reid holding their son, his expression one of wonder and devotion, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. The woman who had once declared that every man she trusted had used her, had found not just a partner who earned her trust daily, but a love that continued to deepen with each passing year. By their 5th anniversary, the Nolans had established themselves firmly in Tucson's growing community. Eleanor divided her time between teaching and caring for their family, which now included William and his 2-year-old sister, Sarah, named for Reid's sister. Reid had been appointed chief marshal for the district, a position that allowed him to remain based in Tucson while overseeing law enforcement throughout the surrounding territory. Their home had expanded with a new wing to accommodate their growing family and Eleanor's need for a small study, where she developed the school curriculum. On warm evenings, they still sat together on the porch swing, watching their children play in the yard as the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors. "You ever think about that day in Superior?" Reid asked one evening, his arm around Eleanor's shoulders. She smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Sometimes. It seemed like the end of everything, but it was really the beginning." "The beginning of us," Reid agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "The best thing that ever happened to me was finding you behind that water trough." Eleanor laughed softly. "Not my most dignified moment, but your bravest," he countered. "You were ready to start over with nothing but determination and courage." Eleanor looked out at their children, their home, the life they'd built together. "I never imagined I could be this happy, this secure," she admitted. "You didn't just earn my trust, Reid. You taught me to trust myself again." As darkness fell over Tucson, they remained together on the porch, talking quietly about the future they continued to build one day, one promise kept at a time.